is this just fantasy? It really isn't. This is something special, as Jeff Lemire put it. This is Coda. This is a book that's won some awards, and there are new issues, or a couple new issues out on stands as of from like last year, and I think very recently. So it's relatively new, and there are 3 collected volumes of like trade paperbacks like this of Coda out now, as well as I think a hardback that just came out that has all of it put together. Anyway, this is a very interesting series and one that I'm a big fan of. It's by Simon Spurrier and Matias Bergara. Matias Bergara is one of my favorite artists working today. Just such a unique and energetic artistic voice that I can't wait to share more of. And Simon Spurrier is a really interesting writer, and he's gotten to work with a lot of really talented artists. So, yeah, I feel like I would hope he considers himself lucky. So, I just have the trade here because I actually don't have the individual issues. I started reading this once it hit trade, which I've stopped doing that necessarily, or for the most part, if I can pick stuff up in individual issues, I will. But here, it's just hard to come by the original issues of this because I think people keep them because it's cool. The people who wanted to read it read it. So, what is Coda? Well, we're gonna talk about the first issue, and via the first issue, we will be able to learn about the world. So yeah, Matias Bergara's doing all the illustrating. He's doing apparently some color assistance by Michael Duig. It's letter by Jim Campbell and Colin Bell, but Matias is doing a lot of the storytelling here, the visual storytelling. So, big crazy start here of this book. We have the rotting corpse of a dragon that's still talking, which I find that fascinating. And like all these giant mushrooms, there's stuff growing in it and on it, and because some of it may be still flesh, but all of other parts of it might just be growths on it. Like his wings have completely deteriorated. And we also getting our lead character is kind of writing to a loved one. And there's a lot of flavor text that's in this book that comes from the main character essentially doing this, like kind of soliloquizing to this loved one. So the premise of this book, which is, I think, really what sets it apart, aside from this amazing art, here we have our lead character who, for the most part, goes by or Mr. Hum. And he's a one-time farmer and current scavenger, because this is a post-apocalyptic fantasy story. And not like it's a post-apocalyptic world that has fantasy elements. No, this is take your high fantasy world, your classic high fantasy world with knights and dragons and elves and magic and all that stuff, and essentially what happened is, in the I think at some point it even puts it kind of like this, that in the long series of dark lords that threatened the world, one of them succeeded. And what they succeeded in doing was essentially ending any new magic. So this is a post-apocalyptic fantasy world in which there is no new magic, and any magic that can be found is scrounged and taken from, old enchanted helmets and weapons and invisible coins and partially enchanted creatures and garments and stuff like that. And the substance that they vie for from these magic elements is called Acker. And it's similar, like in a Mad Max movie, that like gasoline or maybe water would have. That it's a commodity. It's what everybody wants. And our lead character, he was essentially kind of like a simple farmer, and he was also never really like, he was not like an adventuring sort. And he kind of, there's this a little bit of a saltiness or a curmudgeon-y nature to this character. Specifically, he kind of thinks all the old like quest and magic and all the old like high fantasy shit is stupid, or he always thought it was. And the fact that it's all gone, he both doesn't really miss it, but he also recognizes that the world as it is much uglier. But he's just very cynical. He's a very cynical character. He kind of always has this look on his face. And just every page is just a delight to look at, a delight of details. Like this panel, I mean, right here is him crawling around inside the giant skeleton of a dragon. And there's swords and stuff in here. There's these rats, and he finds little pieces of metal. That's another thing he scrounges for, is metal, but he also scrounges for magic items. And yeah, it's just kind of this vast wilderness that he lives in. And there's other people who are scrounging around. And the rather awesome thing is that his mount, if you will, is formerly a unicorn, but now it has 5 horns. So 5 horns. So it's technically a pentacorn. And it is just big and nasty. It just eviscerates this guy who was threatening him. And his name is Nag. And it also has a foul mouth. It's always comes out in these kind of cartoonish expletives, which I love. And he is he's just this foul mouthed creature. And we learn why he's not a unicorn, or not just a single horn unicorn anymore. And it's because the Acker, or this like magic substance, it's kind of, because it's like old and extracted from other elements, it's kind of shitty. And so it's kind of toxic a little. And we get a great scene where he's being chased by some other people stealing from or just more like kind of raiders or scroungers here. And they are like, basically you can take that Acker, put into a syringe, and like juice your mount to make it go faster or make it more intense or whatever. And our lead here has done it so much to his unicorn that it starts sprouting other horns. And like, you kind of get that sense from some of the other creatures where like they'll be a little bit like scroungy and nasty. It's just there's so many cool inventive things in this comic, and I'm not even really going over the story bit by bit here, this first issue, just because just the premise alone, I think, is that's got to be its selling point, really. You either are digging it and you'll read it, or you're not interested and you won't read it. I guess the other deciding point here is the art. Now, that is something that I just want to absorb, is the art of this work. and just the amazing colors, the amazing line work. And yeah, this is a fun but like kind of dark and brutal world to play around in. And our main character, he finds his way to this kind of walled city, this massive walled city, and it's got a big like cannon at the top to defend it. And so it's kind of like other post-apocalyptic worlds where any kind of vestige of civilization, it has to wall itself in, otherwise you're not gonna survive because there's just raiders out there. Oh, and so another little minor detail is our main character, he's got a false leg, or he's got a partially false leg, and he can kind of smuggle stuff in there. But yeah, his nag, his horse is just this big, scary brute. And he comes in here because basically it's so he can trade stuff or sell stuff to people. And he, through the course of this first issue, ingratiates himself to the leadership, because right here, so they have the big cannon on the top, and they're kind of parading these big cannonballs that they've loaded up with it, and it's filled with this acker, so it's meant to be able to protect the city. And kind of like in a Mad Max where everybody wants gasoline, or water. Everybody wants acker, and he really wants it, but we don't really know why. And he's aware that somehow in this world, or in this town, they're sitting on a huge supply of it somehow. Like they seem to have a large backstock, or whatever you want to call it, of it, or stockpile of it. And just look at some of these characters. Huh? Like, look at these little bit drawings here, and he colors this guy specific so that you pay attention to him and realize he's trouble. And he's gonna hit this ball with a hammer and cause a huge explosion, just blowing people to bits. But anyway, he's come here to kind of investigate their acker, their magic situation, and he kind of does some good here. He tried to stop it, and the president, or the mayor of town, the leader, she recognizes this, and basically she wants to bring him into this fold of the Paladins of the Peace Guard, which he thinks is really lame. Is this group of traditionally styled heroes, like fantasy heroes. And because the whole idea behind them is everybody's just still trying to hold on to the past, even though the world is much worse off now, and it's just not that thing anymore. All of these people are essentially kind of living in denial. But by creating these knights, or these heroic figures, everybody can continue to essentially lie to themselves. I mean, there is a strong, you could say, like, cynical streak to the attitude of the book, or at least some of the characters in the book. And I think that just comes from the kind of bleakness that's in these kinds of stories, these like post-apocalyptic stories. But I just find the art in it magnetic. And there is something about these characters and this world that just makes me want to potentially just see how things shake out and see how things may change. And essentially what she is informing him at this point is that, again, you can sort of make out this giant shape, and this giant is essentially like a walking city in and of itself, but it's of these like kind of raiders. Thundergog, the last giant, and they have that cannon with all those big cannonballs to essentially protect themselves from this giant, but because they're like a bunch of their balls were blown up, they are afraid that they are not going to be armed well enough to defend themselves. And so they need more iron. And he came in bringing scrounged metal. So they thinking that they can use him to possibly get more. And hey, if he gets more, he can join the paladins of the Peace Guard, and he can potentially become do some good for them, or potentially get something out of it for himself. And so he kind of goes on this little journey with one of the Peace Guard guys, and we kind of learn a little bit about just how the world used to be, and how it is that kind of fantasy world that you would want to, or that you can imagine, and just realized in such an amazing way. It makes me want to see, Matias Bergara and Simon Spurrier do a prequel comic of that high fantasy world before the fall, or I'd love to see if they could cover that, just because I just think that it would be gorgeous. Because I really love the look of all this. Look at all these giant mushrooms and everything. Again, such great colors. But eventually, they're out looking for iron, and a source for iron, and this guy's useless. But then when he drinks some Acker, he gets, again, juiced up. And he's got a flaming sword, but again, he's still pretty useless. And so every fantasy world kind of messes with the lore or the specifics of classic fantasy species. So for instance, this guy, he's called an Urkin, and they are essentially orcs in this universe. So, and then like the elves are, it's YLF, so elves, I don't know, or Yilfs in any case, but like that, so it's crafting its own lore, and it's kind of differentiating itself from anything out there any generic thing out there. It's crafting a very specific world. And so then when he goes out to face this Urkin, he just talks to him. And that's because he knows the Urkin language, but we don't know why yet. And he recognizes a tattoo that this guy has. And so he's going to this essentially underworld dealer, and it's this lady that is referred to as, she's the Mercrone, or essentially like a mermaid, just I guess she's older than a maid, so she's a Mercrone. They spell it in an interesting way. I'm explaining what's happening, but it almost doesn't matter in me trying to sell this book to you, because just look at it. If this art doesn't appeal to you, then it doesn't matter what the story is, really, because that's the thing about a comic, is that it has to, I feel like visually it has to work for you, and it may not work for everybody, because it is very stylized. If you want something that's a little bit more, you say, grounded or realistic, this isn't it. This is extremely stylized, and almost feels improvisational at times, but is also very precise at other times. Like, she's riding around in a giant bathtub. What a cool idea. And all of her shit's just kind of resting around her, because she belongs in the water. But she's kind of like a underworld kind of fence. And the idea is that he wants something from her. It's to develop essentially a spell, but he needs a shit ton of Acker for it. He needs more than he's ever probably going to have access to. And and the problem is though is that he doesn't have enough, and for what he wants to do. And the idea, and also an idea that's been put forth here, is that he's writing to his beloved, but his beloved is he keeps describing that she's with, or that she's among the or been, I guess, taken in by the, like, this tribe of Urkin, essentially. And it seems like it's a dire situation, and he wants to rescue her. And essentially how this issue shakes out is she hooks him up with some iron so that he looks good for for essentially the mayor here, and he's ingratiated into this town because he knows that they're sitting on a lot of Acker, and so he wants to, or a large source of Acker, and he wants to get access to it. I also love that this guy's terrified of his pentacorn here. But he gets suited up, he gets to join this guard, and what I really like is as we're reading through these little captions, we're learning insights about his love, and one of them is that he's not the heroic sort. This doesn't suit him, but it would suit her. She is a heroic person, and that does care a lot about people, and it's something that she has taught him. And I think that, I don't know, it already sets up a really interesting relationship. But as he, is again ingratiating himself to his fellow knights and stuff, he roofies them so that he can sneak into their kind of secret chamber and figure out what their source of Acker is. But he hears a voice coming from it, and it's an elf. One of the and the elves are essentially thought of as extinct, but they have this one, and they are carving him up, like chopping off pieces of him because they regenerate, and from his chopped off limbs, they generate the Acker, or the magic substance, because elves are inherently magic. And crazy dark, crazy image too, but like, holy shit. That's a really dark source for their power, you could say. So, that said, it is a post-apocalyptic story, so that's kind of what you're signing up for. So, here we are, folks. That is Chroma issue 1, and that's what you kind of gotta take or leave. Is this the vibe that you want out of a fantasy book? And I can tell you right now, it is for me, and it's a surprise because I'm usually not into like post-apocalyptic stuff too much. It's gonna have to have like either great characters or a really interesting story. This one basically has both, as far as I'm concerned. But I just think it's such an interesting approach to fantasy, and it changes it up. Like, I would love to see a story told when things were good in this universe. I think that could be really fun and exciting and interesting. But this is also interesting because it's just taking a different approach to it. And I highly, highly recommend it because I think it just keeps getting better. And we'll talk more about further issues, but I just wanted to introduce this to y'all because I think that if you're not aware of it, if you're a fantasy fan and you haven't been reading this, give it a shot. I think you'll love it. And if you're new to fantasy comics, this is a modern classic, and it's also a different kind of spin on fantasy than you may be used to. And I just think it is fantastic. But you know what else I think is fantastic? my comic, Side Questers. So this is the first 8 issues, the first volume, the first complete story put into one book. And you can buy it on my website. You can also read these issues on Global Comics. And it's definitely not as bleak as this. It is definitely in a period of high fantasy and adventure, and but it's about this kind of odd couple friendship that forms around doing side quests. And if you like this world and you want to see more from it, I also have my Haxan anthologies, which are about magic users in the same universe. And each of these are 60-page books that have a couple of different short stories in them that deal with, magic users. And you can read these stories on Global Comics, and you can also buy these volumes on my website. And you can also buy on my website 3-Panel Origin, the first 3 years, and 3PO Comics. And 3-Panel Origin's my weekly web comic that's in its 9th year now, and I create a character and tell their origin in 3 panels. It's kind of got the vibe of the Tick, and this physical volume has all like revamped artwork and coloring, and I'm very, very proud of it. So you can buy this volume on my website, and you can also buy this book of short stories in the same universe on my website, and also see ads for my other books in it. What? Anyway, those are my books, and please consider giving them a shot, and definitely consider giving Coda a shot.